On today's episode, we'll be doing a mid-playoff evaluation of the Dallas Stars. We'll be talking about Roope Hintz and why he should be a favorite to potentially win the Conn Smythe Trophy. We'll talk about Jake Oettinger and what he needs to do in order to make sure the Dallas Stars keep this playoff run going. And then we'll also talk about the most underrated Dallas Star on the team during the playoffs. And it might not be who you think. All of this and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Stars.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars hockey, coming to you on this Wednesday, May 17th. And whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for stopping by and making Locked On Stars your first listen every single day. Be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcasting platform of choice. Remember, we are always free and available, no matter where or how you choose to listen or watch. We have a few days before us, before the Dallas Stars and Vegas Golden Knights go head-to-head in the Western Conference Finals. Game 1 is not until Friday, but the Dallas Stars, Vegas Golden Knights, and even the teams out east, the Hurricanes and the Panthers, all of them are currently sitting at the quote-unquote halfway point of the Stanley Cup playoffs. You have to win 16 games, and each of these teams have won 8 so far through the first 2 rounds, and they still have 2 more rounds to go if they want to be hoisting Lord Stanley at the end of the season. So I figured it's a nice time to do a little bit of an evaluation, a little bit of a checkup on where the Stars are at, who's been performing well, who we need to see more from, and who's been the most underrated player on the team. We'll do some of that today and probably bleed into a little bit of tomorrow's episode as well before we get ready to go on Friday for Game 1. But if you're going to talk about the Dallas Stars in the postseason in the year of our Lord 2023, you have to be talking about Roope Hintz, who has been terrific throughout this entire postseason run with 9 goals, 10 assists, through 13 games played through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. He currently leads all active playoff players in points. He's only sitting now behind Connor McDavid, who has 20 to Roope Hintz's 19, but Connor McDavid is no longer in the playoffs, and so it would not be too outlandish to believe that Hintz could very likely reclaim the throne as the top scorer in the NHL playoffs within the first game of their third round series. And for the longest time, he was in the lead. He was the leading scorer throughout the first round. He set a record, a franchise record for the Stars for most points scored in a single playoff series. I mean, he's been nothing short of spectacular here through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. And he's been the driving force for the Stars offense all postseason long. And there's been so many other inconsistencies throughout the roster. Joe Pavelski gets injured in Game 1 against the Minnesota Wild, misses the entire series. And you have a guy like Tyler Seguin who's stepped up and made some big plays, but also hasn't always scored with the consistency that you'd like to see. Jason Robertson has not been scoring. He didn't score a single goal against the Seattle Kraken. But despite all of that, and despite anything else that this Stars team has gone through over the first 2 series, Roope Hintz has been consistent. He's always been there. He's never really dipped or looked ill-prepared or looked like the numbers he's putting up have been a fluke. He's been a very steady line of production throughout these first 2 series against the Wild and the Kraken. He's been, in my mind, the MVP for the Dallas Stars up to this point in the tournament. And if the Dallas Stars are to win the Stanley Cup, I think that he should be the clear favorite for the Conn Smythe Trophy, the award given to the player who was most valuable at the end of the postseason. Cale Makar won it last year for the Colorado Avalanche. Andrei Vasilevsky has won it for the Tampa Bay Lightning recently. Victor Hedman won it back in 2020. I think Roope Hintz is making a very strong case to be a Conn Smythe finalist, if not the Conn Smythe Award winner when it's all said and done. Of course, you typically do have to win the Stanley Cup in order to win that award. But again, I think the Dallas Stars have as good a case as any of the 4 remaining teams to win the Cup. And you even look at odds makers, and the odds makers at FanDuel, a sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network, they have Roope Hintz a little bit lower than I would have expected. And they have him behind some guys that I'm not quite sure should be there. Sebastian Aho is a great player, and he leads the voting right now, at least on FanDuel's website, at plus 650, but he only has 10 points in 11 games. Jack Eichel comes in right behind Aho at plus 750. That makes a little bit more sense to me. Eichel has 14 points in 11 games. Matthew Tkachuk at plus 800. I think that makes sense. 16 points in 12 games. Mark Stone, that's fine, I guess. I don't really see him being better than Roope Hintz or having a stronger case for the Conn Smythe over Roope Hintz. Freddie Anderson, Sergei Bobrovsky, goalies are always a little bit different, but I think both of them have played fine so far this postseason. And then in the 7th spot, you get Roope Hintz at plus 1,100. And I feel like Roope Hintz has as good a case as anyone else on this list ahead of him to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. And then right after Roope Hintz, you have 2 more Dallas Stars and Jake Oettinger at plus 1,300 and Joe Pavelski at plus 1,400. Very interesting to me to see kind of how FanDuel expect things to play out. Of course, I'm sure a lot of the odds that go into that factor into who they imagine would win the Stanley Cup. So, I mean, I think Carolina is likely a favorite in a lot of people's eyes at this point. So that could make sense as to why Sebastian Aho could be the front runner. And then out west, I think right now Vegas is the favorite in the series over the Stars. So it makes sense why Jack Eichel might be drawing more votes over Roope Hintz. But if Roope Hintz continues to play at the level he's been playing, and the Stars continue to get good production from Jake Oettinger and Miro Heiskanen and up and down the lineup, I really see no reason why people shouldn't be buying into the idea of the Stars going to the Stanley Cup Finals and potentially winning the whole thing. And all that to say, Roope Hintz has been an absolute pleasure, an absolute treat to watch here in the playoffs, already earning his new contract that he signed this season that will kick in next season. He's going to be an $8 million, per year player. And in my mind, he's already proven that he's worth that. And this is really just the beginning, it seems, for Dallas Stars fans. Even though we've watched Roope Hintz do his thing for several seasons here in Dallas, we're finally starting to see him take over and be, that superstar-esque player that we know he can be. This team is already loaded with plenty of other superstars with Jason Robertson, Miro Heiskanen, Jake Oettinger. Wyatt Johnston is certainly ascending to that rank as well. But Roope Hintz is right there in the middle. And honestly, it is, in my mind, up there with the best forwards in the league, especially in terms of two-way playing that defense, but also, of course, delivering on offense like we've seen him do time and time again all season long, including here in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Well, we're going to continue this mid-postseason evaluation of the Dallas Stars, and we'll talk about a guy that is considered to be the backbone of the team and a guy that we need to see some improvements from in round 3 if the Dallas Stars want to keep dancing into the postseason. We'll talk about Jake Oettinger and evaluate his performance through the first 2 rounds coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can make sure every part you need fits just right. Just add your ride to my garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. A special thank you to all of our everydayers out there making Locked On Stars a part of your daily routine here in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We've got a few days off. The Stars beat the Kraken in Game 7 on Monday night, and they'll take on the Vegas Golden Knights in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals on Friday night. Puck drop around 8:30 Central Time, so probably closer to 8:50, 9 o'clock on a Friday night. But plenty to discuss with this Stars team as we kind of go through these episodes of a mid-postseason evaluation. We, of course, talked about the Dallas Stars MVP up to this point, Roope Hintz, with his 19 points in 13 games. But we also need to discuss the most important player to this team. Roope Hintz is the MVP, but you want to talk about a guy that if he's on, this team can go all the way. But if this guy's off, the season could come to an end sooner than expected. It's Jake Oettinger. Jake Oettinger, of course, had heavy expectations placed upon him heading into these playoffs, given what he did last year against the Calgary Flames in the playoffs, where he delivered some of the best performances we've ever seen from a goalie, let alone the fact that he was in his first playoff appearance. And in round 1 of the postseason, I think it's fair to say that Jake Oettinger lived up to the expectations that were placed upon him with a .929 save percentage, just above a 2 goals against average, 2.01. He also recorded a shutout in that series against the Minnesota Wild. He wasn't his best at all times, but for the majority of that series, Jake Oettinger was in control, and especially at the back end of that series, he really put his foot down and asserted his dominance over that Minnesota team and made things incredibly difficult for their offense, shutting down some of their key offensive weapons like Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Zuccarello, Matt Boldy, you name it. It was difficult for the Minnesota Wild to get things going offensively, and Jake Oettinger was a huge reason for that. Although round 2 against the Seattle Kraken did see Jake face some adversity with an .877 save percentage, a 3.5 goals against average, and we saw him get chased from the game twice in the series. It's fair to say that it was a shaky performance for Otter throughout the entirety of that second round. He had some really bright moments, especially in the latter stages, especially in Game 7, but we also saw him reach some lows that we've really never seen him reach before, not just in the playoffs, but in his entire career. Game 3 in particular against the Seattle Kraken, that first game at Climate Pledge Arena was literally his worst outing as a starter in the NHL in terms of numbers. The Kraken were just getting goal after goal after goal, and we started to show some concern for Jake Oettinger. But we saw him bounce back from that game. We saw him bounce back from a less than ideal Game 6. And so there's still plenty of reason to believe that Jake Oettinger can be the guy for the Stars in the playoffs, especially in these playoffs, as they've now reached the Western Conference Finals. But the most impressive stat for Jake Oettinger, in my eyes, in the playoffs so far, is the fact that he has not yet lost back-to-back games. No one has ever been better all season than Jake Oettinger after a loss. We've talked at length, ad nauseum, about that record. What is it, 22, 1-3, or 20, something to that extent. Over 20 wins and only 4 losses after a loss in 2022, 2023 for Jake Oettinger. His mental toughness has been praised ad nauseum by myself and many others who cover this team, and even Pete DeBoer. That's something he touched on in his postgame presser after Game 7, that Jake Oettinger has a mental toughness and a mental capacity that really no one else seems to have, just in general. It's unreal how fast he can bounce back and shake off a bad performance and then go out and deliver a lights-out performance in order to help his team get the win. And that's been the most impressive thing for me watching him play in this postseason. While things haven't been perfect, and we know that they're not going to be perfect, that's something we talked about in the middle of that Kraken series. You look at past Stanley Cup champions, their goalies weren't perfect from end to end. They had a few shaky performances here and there, but the important thing is they found ways to respond and found ways to help put their team back on top after those losses. And that's what Jake Oettinger did in the series against Seattle. And the numbers certainly don't look great, but the most important number of all was the fact that they got 4 wins in that series, and they're still alive, and they're still standing with a chance to be winning and hoisting the Stanley Cup trophy at the end of the season. And now with the Dallas Stars and the rest of the 4 teams in the playoffs getting all of this downtime, I think that's exactly what Jake Oettinger needs. He needs time to rest and recover because he's already been through so much this entire season, starting over 60 games for the Stars in the regular season. He's now played in 13 games. here in the postseason, started all 13 games, and we've seen Scott Wedgwood come in relief twice. But Jake Oettinger has racked up the minutes. He's played 765 minutes so far this postseason. He's really been put through the ringer this season with all of the workload that he's had to handle. And so even if it's not an incredibly long amount of time, really just Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you throw in some practices in there too, it's not a ton, but I think it could go a long way in making sure that Jake Oettinger is in the right frame of mind heading into this third round series against the Vegas Golden Knights, because Vegas they're going to bring it on offense. They're fourth in the NHL in playoffs so far in goals scored at 41. And the special teams are fine for the Vegas Golden Knights. The power play isn't great, only executing at a 17.5% rate. Seattle was executing at 14.3%. So the power play for Vegas is a little bit better than Seattle's, but still not by much. They're below average amongst all of the teams that have participated in the playoffs in the year 2023. But they still do have a plethora, an onslaught of deadly weapons. The aforementioned Jack Eichel, Chandler Stevenson, Jonathan Marchessault is coming off of a hat-trick performance in Game 6 against the Edmonton Oilers. So Jake Oettinger is still going to have his hands full, and you, of course, have to approach the Golden Knights differently than you did the Minnesota Wild and the Seattle Kraken. So I'm curious to see, again, we talked about it at the end of that series against the Wild. How can Jake Oettinger find that next gear and take that next step as the stage continues to get bigger and the lights shine a little bit brighter in the conference finals as opposed to a first or second round series? And now how can he do it with the time that he's had to rest? Can he mentally get himself in the right frame of mind where he can avoid the bad performances altogether and avoid getting chased from games? That's what I want to see from Jake Oettinger. I want to see him play with much more confidence, and he already has a lot of confidence in the crease. We all know that, but I want to see him take that next step where he looks even more confident and looks even more unstoppable, because I think goaltending could be a huge make or break point for either of these teams here in this series, with Vegas just seemingly having a revolving door of netminders this season due to injury. And I'm curious to see how he could match up with Adin Hill in this Western Conference final. But Jake Oettinger did go on record saying he believes that this team, the Dallas Stars, can win it all in the year 2023. And if they're going to do just that, Jake Oettinger, needs to be the most reliable player out there on the ice. I believe he can do it. And now it's just a matter of sitting back and watching and seeing what he can do out there in the Western Conference Finals. Well, we're going to cover one more player on this Dallas Stars team on today's episode. I'm going to give you my thoughts on who the most underrated player on the Dallas Stars roster has been in these playoffs. And again, it might not be who you think. More on that coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by our friends, our newest sponsor, Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs provide the most comfortable shorts you'll ever wear. They're comfortable and they're great looking. I personally know for a fact that I look better and feel better when I wear Bird Dogs. Their stretchy fabric makes my legs look great, and they're comfier than any other shorts or pants that I own. They give me the freedom to wear one pair of shorts on the golf course, whether I'm going to a casual meeting with friends, on a date. Really not a bad situation or time to wear Bird Dog shorts, especially if you're always moving or on the go. Like me, I like to go out for a walk at least once a day to like to stay active, and Bird Dogs works perfectly for that. They're stylish and they're comfortable, so I know I'm getting the best of both worlds when I wear the Bird Dog shorts. So you can get your very own pair. Don't just listen to me talk about it. Experience it for yourself. You can go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL, and when you enter the promo code LockedOnNHL, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. You'll see it. I have it right here. If you're watching on YouTube, I have my tumbler with the Bird Dogs logo on it. Excellent products all around from Bird Dogs. Be sure to check it out. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and use our promo code LockedOnNHL. The Dallas Stars have had plenty of heroes here in the postseason, guys that have risen to the occasion and delivered some excellent performances. But they've been a lot of guys that we've expected big things from. But I want to talk about a player who I have discussed before during this playoff run, but I think he is the most underrated player on the Stars roster right now, and a pretty big reason as to why the team has had success, but he's not going to get the national attention. And that is, of course, Evgeny Dadonov. And I said they might not be who you expect. Maybe some of you guys were expecting him because he has been so excellent through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs with 9 points, 4 goals, 5 assists. And he's also tied for first on the entire team in plus minus at a +6, tied with Joel Hanley. I know plus minus isn't always an end-all be-all factor, but I do think that is an important stat for the way Evgeny Dadonov plays. And you mix, the energy and the effort with the actual production in terms of numbers. And Dadonov has been a sneaky great player for the Stars here through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. He's played incredibly hard. His forecheck has been relentless throughout the entire postseason, but it was especially on display in Game 7 against the Seattle Kraken. That's really where I started to notice it even more. Early in that game, he was taking away a lot of passing lanes and just made life a little bit harder for the Seattle Kraken in terms of getting out of their own defensive zone and trying to navigate the neutral zone. And this is something that Dadonov has done pretty well throughout the entirety of his career, but especially here in Dallas. He's kind of taken on that role on his line as the guy who goes in and does a little bit of the dirty work. It's not that Jamie Benn and Wyatt Johnston can't do what he does, but you tend to see those guys focus a little bit more on the scoring and the playmaking. And then you have Evgeny Dadonov on that line who, if we're watching Johnston or Ben score a goal, it a lot of times comes as the result of a heavy forecheck led by Evgeny Dadonov. And so that's how he's been able to pick up some of these assists. I remember in particular in that Minnesota series, that feed, the great pass from Dadonov behind the net in the trapezoid to Wyatt Johnston, who was crashing down. It's plays like that make Evgeny Dadonov so effective, and he's been so incredibly fun to watch here in the playoffs up to this point. You have to imagine that he's going to continue this energy and continue this level of play going into the Western Conference Finals because he's taking on his former team in the Vegas Golden Knights, and he has kind of a weird history with that team. He only was there for 1 season, but the Vegas Golden Knights tried to trade him to the Anaheim Ducks at last year's trade deadline. That was a move that was eventually shut down by the NHL due to a no-trade clause in Dadonov's contract that the VGK either missed or ignored. Something went wrong there, but at the end of the day, the Vegas Golden Knights basically said to Evgeny Dadonov, "We don't want you," but then they were stuck with him for the remainder of the season because the trade did get shut down. But Pete DeBoer was there as the coach, and I obviously now don't really believe that Pete DeBoer had an issue with Dadonov. Rather, the Vegas Golden Knights were looking to make cap space and make room at the trade deadline, and it was more the front office looking to move on from Dadonov. I don't think Pete DeBoer would have wanted Dadonov at this year's deadline if there was an issue there. And clearly, Dadonov has played very, very well since coming over from Montreal. So I think that bond is good. But you think, Evgeny Dadonov would love the satisfaction of getting a win against his former team and a team that really didn't seem to want him in a very awkward and weird situation. He might not say it or might not show much emotion towards that, but I guarantee you it's in the back of his mind a little bit, even if, again, he doesn't express it. Because Dadonov, in my brief interactions, seeing him and being around him in post-game media, gatherings in the locker room or in the press conference room at the American Airlines Center, he doesn't always have a ton to say, but I think he speaks a lot louder with his actions and the way that he plays rather than he does with his words or what he has to say to us, the media. And that's made him one of the more underrated players here in these playoffs and absolutely the most underrated player on the Dallas Stars roster. Again, plays incredibly hard. He's not the biggest guy out there on the ice, under 200 pounds, below 6 feet tall, but still plays with a ton of fight, similar to a style of Max Domi, but maybe not as much in your face, but more just always around. And you know that he's always going to be somewhere making a play and giving it his all. And he really just makes that third line of Ben and Johnston, and then adding him, that line really pops when he's out there with that forecheck and makes things incredibly difficult for the opposing team to game plan around someone who can forecheck as heavy as him. But then you also have to keep one of the best rookies in the NHL in check. And then Jamie Benn is kind of a jack of all trades too, with the way that he can hit, he can forecheck, he can shoot, he can pass. Just an incredibly difficult line to stop. And the addition of Evgeny Dadonov has done wonders for the Dallas Stars through the early stages of the playoffs. And I personally can't wait to see what he does in order to take some of his frustrations, if you will, out on the Vegas Golden Knights. But that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you so much again for tuning in and making us your first listen every single day. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting platform of choice and on the YouTube channel. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel about this Dallas Stars team through the first 2 series, with still hopefully 2 series ahead of them here in the playoffs. We'll be back here tomorrow talking a little bit more about this team, a bird's eye view, before we get prepared for the Western Conference Finals on Friday. But I hope you guys enjoy your Wednesday. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.